We are up, yeah. We are working, I guess. We are on, they will say. Let me start this. And also, what the fuck? What? PC, hello. Are we going to crash? No. Thank you. Yes? Yes? No? What's up? What do I have open that I can close? Ah, I see. I see now. So much stuff. Oh, problem. Is this alright? And I have changed the amazing. uh, So sleep amazing. So, yeah. Why is everything so laggy? What's the problem with this? What is going on? We have no, I don't have anything that I should have opened this time around. I mean, I can stop this. I think so, but that probably won't fix the problem. What's making anything? Ah. Anyways, regardless, so sleepy. That is like phrase. I don't want to speak. I why don't you watch an older instead of streaming? Why don't I play like instead of playing a video, I play myself, and we use that as reaction content. Be amazing. I don't. Anyway, I don't. I don't. Also, is it like everywhere? I checked out. Isn't lie. Okay, it stops lying after some time. I don't know why, but that's okay. I what? Yeah, uploaded somewhat. 288 was the last class. What? I took 20 streams to continue. What was my bro? To have okay, okay. I used to will try to finish the watched. What's the lesson? Finish before, thank you. I need to talk too much and too loudly for this to pick up my voice. I don't want to speak. Man, it is, but the consequence of my own actions, what has me so sleepy lately, so I don't even want to think about it. Because, yes, I am sleepy. Did, how did you know? Good guess. But anyways, yes, that you have a surprisingly, you know, slide that whoever invented that is a fucking genius, I guess. Um, but yeah, anyways, also wait, there was something about the remote career or something like that, no? I remember thinking about it. Yeah, I don't even know what to do it. But yeah, imagine trying to hear somebody speak and they constantly are whispering because they don't want to speak properly, not because it is a feature of what I make, but rather because they literally don't want to speak properly. That is surprisingly, that is inspiring, certainly. That is something that I enjoy. Let's say that I have to increase my volume because the person I'm trying to hear is whispering. So yeah, sorry, I guess I shouldn't be whispering so much. Even if I am tired, it doesn't justify uh, whispering. But I mean, I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to talk. I will have. Yeah, I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left to complain. I want to remain. I wanted to remain in. I to to exert myself. I am tired. But anyways, completely. Anyways, we have a quote unquote with yeah with like 20,000 quotes uh, work to we have at the very least a video to finish, so that is something, yeah. But I don't know, why don't somebody else do that? Why can't I command somebody else to do that instead of having it to be myself, man? uh Anyways. It is. I mean, the funny thing is also that because of the lack of sleep, it is incredibly harder for me to think about anything at all. But at least I have learned how to handle the woof of always having stuff bottled up because I don't talk with anybody. Therefore, I can come here and I don't know, throw up every single idea that I had instead of my mind, I guess. But yeah, anyways, hello. Uh, Thank you for your patience and welcome yet another day with my biggest happiness that I say. Hi, everybody. But anyways, yeah. Hi, people. Here we are. It's another Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah, Tuesday. Yet another Tuesday. Existing, I guess. Doing stuff. Doing. Why belligerent came to my mind? I don't know. Belligerent stuff, certainly. But yeah, here we are. As always, welcome. Hi. Have a seat. For being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for lurking. Thanks for watching the things. Thanks for everything. As always. Yeah. Here we are. after I don't know, it was a week, it wasn't a week. How much did it take me to stream this time? I want to see it. July 9, 3, yeah, almost a week. Once again, this guy who says he's trying to be consistent, that is a lot of things, but consistent, is certainly nice to watch. But anyways, the point is, here we are, and we are finally back to continue with what we had to continue before, what we left unattended, what I should have finished last time, certainly. I didn't even try to finish it. What was the last discussion? It was something, that's why I lost so much time talking about it. I spent like 2.5 hours, I think, complaining about something or something of the sort. It was like, what was it? I was talking about. Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember, I remember. I I left one one very particular topic completely unattended from the lessons that we were having on the previous stream to the last one. And in the last one, it was that I properly talk about something that I decided to not even mention. To some degree, there was still something else that I also didn't mention, but that second one might as well be of lesser importance. Let's say, in reality, it probably is just a justification for me to not properly even try to mention it, but yeah, the point was, we we did everything. And also, thankfully, because there was such a time gap, I have a time also to even consume some information regarding to the topic itself of the lesson. That is quite fantastic. Indeed, I didn't even expect that to happen. I I got recommended a book, and I didn't even knew it literally was one of the main books that influenced all of these last classes that we are having so far. So that is also quite useful. And I don't know, one of the few things though that I want to say about it is in the topic of books and similar. I understand that there is a time constraint, but something that I didn't certainly get was the idea in the lessons, lectures, whatever you want to call them, to not properly address many of the situations that are brought up. Because even if there is a time constraint, you can rapidly narrate every single thing that happens there in order to orient the one, in my case, I will say viewer, certainly the student, you can orient the students towards the proper understanding of the concepts that you are trying to talk about. And not because this is something related even tangentially to the main contents of the book, but rather because it literally is part of the analysis that you're performing over the situations which you use as examples and similar. And a proper analysis, therefore, of these things will allow people to get in more depth how is it that these different mechanisms of the mind work, let's say, and they weren't even close to being fully explained. One of them I have to accept in the book, it was like, I don't know, 10% of the book spent trying to explain this one in feature, let's say, that everything else can be summed up in, I don't know, 2 minutes, three at the best. And it didn't seem to be done like that. There were a lot of questions and a lot of things talk about in the lectures that were simply brought up for the students to think about or something like that, not a proper solution, not a proper analysis, no usefulness behind the action of merely mentioning them, but I don't know, I don't think it is really a prevalent problem or something like that. It simply is, I guess, part of the. If I had to find some blame, the educational system, once again, not caring that the students might not be capable of getting every single bit of information that is available to them, because after all, you wouldn't even want to give them all that is available for them out there, since that will mean that not only you're giving them the complete course, but you are justifying all the time and money that they spent on your career. Therefore, it ends up being quite useless for you to have um, postgrades and similar things that allow you to keep extracting money from them in, in completely justified ways. And even more, if you have the opportunity to have books published by your teachers and the professors that you put in the lead of the different courses that every student has to go through, when you allow them to consciously, or what would be the term, actively, proactively publicize their books, you also give them the possibility to gain even a better, yeah, an even better or bigger cut of these 8 books, because after all they are raising the awareness of them, and they are only superficially mentioning some aspects that make up the books themselves. Therefore, yeah, as always, it is justified between the confinements of the educational system that it lacks so much, instead of being fully oriented towards the education itself. Think that almost every institution likes to mention so much, but which rarely any one of them is properly capable of providing under no circumstances. But whatever, I guess. I want to start a revolution. I don't feel like doing so, so that is the end of my complaint. Completely anyways, I guess. Um, Now, continuing with something else, thank you. I was thinking, I was putting my mind to work lately. Besides a lot of other stuff that I had been processing, I okay, no wait. I want to drop this one because it was mildly interesting. Like I woke up, I noticed about it after. I don't know if I hadn't thinking about it. Probably that's why I end up coming up to this conclusion. But something interesting about the streaming and about the quality itself of a streaming is that there is a certain part of this that can be minimally related to therapy, but not simply therapy, as in wow, psychological therapy, because it has a side of it in which you can see how somebody is so propense to opening up because of the quality itself of the interactions that you have between the peers that you possess, let's say, or that surround you, or even more with those who are comfortable enough to become regulars in learning about who you are, because there is a degree to which the amount of questions that always gets made about stuff tends to always escalate towards a more personal side, not because there is any malicious intent behind them, but rather because of the nature itself of relationships between humans, let's say, in which you can't always stay in the most superficial degree of conversation. Therefore, it is necessary for them to have deeper and deeper conversations as the bonds slowly increase. Therefore, with enough time, you can observe also how this is perpetuated to a point to which most, if not all of them, end up getting, I don't want to say interrogated, I believe there is a better way to describe it, but something along those lines, which there is always questions being made towards the main um, personality of the streams, let's say like that, so that there is always something new to discover and something new being discovered. And because of this um, tendency, it ends up being unavoidable that most of them will end up at one point or another talking about deeper, more personal stuff, as long as they allow it, I guess, because certainly there is always this idea of putting boundaries and whatever, but even if you are trying to put boundaries, you might not even realize, or you might be completely aware even more of what you are talking about. What is it that you are mentioning? What is it that you are deciding to bring up to light and fully answer? Give a completely detailed answer, let's say. But certainly, I believe in that side. There is this psychological type of therapy created inside of the space that is made when you decide to. I wouldn't simply say stream, perhaps it can also happen in other types of content creation, but maybe something something of this sort is more observable once you take into account that certainly most, if not all, well, no, most, certainly there are some that don't. Most, let's say, streamers enjoy having constant interactions with um, what easily gets described as chat. So yeah, something along those lines end up creating thus a dynamic in which you can say a therapeutic type of experience gets made, albeit probably fully unconsciously. I don't think it is something that people willingly does, but yeah. Also, hello Savannah, welcome. Have a good evening. I think it was. Um, hi. Here we are. Simply starting, simply me. Yeah, saying stuff. I guess as always, quite a natural to be saying stuff. But here we are. Welcome, welcome. I don't know. Certainly it is quite early. Me once again justifying that I am tired. Um, certainly it is quite early, so I I guess uh, I don't know. Here we are. That's the point basically. I think so. That's the point. Therefore, with that I can conclude what I was saying, and I can move into the other idea that I was trying to have before, because I was, yeah, I have been, let's say, the last couple of days. I think it has been probably like 2 or 3 days. Yeah, since I finished the last stream, that it should have been around Thursday, I think so. Thursday or Friday. I have been thinking about it, and I have finally committed to mention it now because I have been trying to once again revisit this whole idea of what ends up being the point in in any conversation that you have of in any way possible discussing ideas and similar. That's what I had been trying to think about and what I had been trying to once again fully analyze and such. That has become yet again my obsession because I accept that I did in fact mention that before. I do quite regularly even have arguments about this. Uh, certainly, certainly with myself. So it is a topic that I keep fresh in the back of my mind, but this time I decided to properly try to engage in it because I I think we have grown a little bit since I started um, this whole adventure of, let's say it, streaming, you know? And you will never expect to be so utterly advanced that you would be capable of doing some stuff better than before, but it simply happens that with the growth of yourself, you unavoidably become more capable of doing things. Be it because you realize that you have an easier time or not. And in this case, I can't avoid but to realize the very same thing happening with this idea because it's something along the lines of why, let's say, I don't even know how they had posed it before. Sorry if it is not even the same question to a certain extent, but that is also part of the problem on this whole discussion. Um, why studying or engaging in any kind of philosophical debate is useful? That's being quite an interesting idea itself. But yeah, that is basically the next topic, the next thing that I wanted to talk about. I was observing out of that. After all, once again, um, too much time spent thinking, too little spent properly talking, so we will see how it goes. But now that I have properly presented the next idea, let me drink water first and foremost. After that, yeah, we will continue. But give me like 1 second. Thank you. So, anyways, no, wait. No. Okay, now for real, I think. So, as I said before, I wanted to discuss this. I wanted to make a simulacrum of this whole discussion because I didn't get the opportunity to do it properly before. I think if it is that I even did it, I don't even remember talking about this, but that is something more related to the nature of myself. Not really that I don't see a possibility of me having done so, but rather that I has completely deleted some stuff. So I don't know if I talked about it before or not. Excuse me. But yeah, the main discussion now for real in starting with it is if there is any particular usefulness behind having so much time to consider and to, let's say, have an meditative life as somebody like I think it was Plato will describe, perhaps, or well, in the Republic of Plato, it was Aristotle who was talking, or it was Plato. I don't even remember at this point. But whoever was there said there are three kinds of life: the normal, the hardship, and the meditative one. So yeah, the going into this line of having an observatory, meditative, contemplative life, and properly trying to see the usefulness of that. Certainly, okay, firstly, because I already made quite an error mentioning that, I certainly don't believe it is that useful to live a completely contemplative life. Life is more than just thinking. Certainly, the lack of action doesn't yield anything, and it can even be catalogued as a problem. I don't think most people would in any particular way. So, having such types of lives, it can even lead to even more problems than everything else, because nowadays philosophy isn't that useful even. You, we don't have that much of a need towards philosophy nowadays society. So to advocate your whole life to the creation of philosophical theories and such might as well not be the most sensible thing to do, let's say, but it doesn't really mean anything at all. Simply was a clarification to make. I don't think, I don't hope that what I am saying there truly affects the decision of anybody. I mean, it will make no sense for you to try and seek on me that type of comprehension. It certainly is important. Once you find it interesting enough to consider philosophy the one and the thing that you decide to advocate yourself to, you have more than enough bells ringing in terms of descriptions about the life of somebody who does only philosophy. But yeah, anyways, continuing with the main point, as I said before, the life in which you think about stuff, the life in which you allow yourself to meditate and to analyze and to be part of as many discussions as you can. I would even say that kind of life. Is it good, that kind of life? Is it necessary? Is it in any way even useful to try and have it? And I was thinking about it because certainly there is a lot of pain that you experience from those type of experiences themselves. You can completely accept the reality that the mind is the biggest creator of pain, and the moment in which you decide to consistently engage philosophical debates with others, you are not only making it harder on yourself, but also on everybody else who decides to strike around you to be present, because this very same nature of a debate is one in which something has to be lost in order to elucidate proper comprehension about a topic, and something that is more aching to the nature of philosophy itself. Sadly, there are a lot of different topics that don't even lead to fully whole explanations of things, let's say, because one of the very same concepts that make up philosophy is the acceptance that there aren't that many things fully written down, let's say. So that thing basically can already give you quite a lot of orientations towards why it ends up being completely useless and completely meaningless to try and have any kind of contemplative life or time to contemplate, even if you're not going to lead a wholly contemplative life, certainly. Give yourself in any particular way time to think, let's say, time to process stuff, and time to sit down and simply discuss the nature of the world with others, I guess, because certainly it is by itself already quite, I will say, annoying, quite annoying indeed, to try and have any degree of a discussion and to realize how much the other person, I believe so, has posed a proper comprehension or analysis of what they are saying, and in the moment in which you realize that they are not even fully aware of what they are talking about. But regardless of that nature, also, hello, Crispian, I hope you're doing well. Welcome. But yeah, uh, we are simply observing something. We are simply observing the idea of having, in to any degree, philosophical debate, I guess, or not not simply debate. See, that is, yeah, okay. Let me say something certainly part of this problem itself, and that is to some degree in nowadays culture. Not only it happens that when you say philosophical debate, you're opening yourself up to the possibility of understanding that there are a lot of ways in which people might have this, but also the tendency to associate every kind of thinking and every kind of process associated with processing stuff itself to some form of philosophy. Therefore, that is why what I said before of this can be taken from multiple optics end up being true, because sadly you find out that a lot of people have to some degree or another a lot of multiple ways in which they can associate the idea of philosophical debate without ever realizing that to some degree they are even at some point attacking the idea itself of thinking, because that is another way in which you can pose this question, in which you can propose to analyze this thing. Let's say the necessity or the utility of having any degree of philosophical debates can also be mentioned even in yourself, because certainly it is a capacity of those who possess consciousness to engage in philosophical debates with themselves once they utilize their minds and the capacity to imagine stuff to do such things. So it ends up being in the later analysis of this very same question that you find out even sometimes that you are discussing the very same nature or quality or usefulness of thinking as a whole thing. That is why it is quite a complicated thing to fully analyze, and that is also why I have been having it so much in my head lately. I was trying to fully see how to make sense out of this, because it seems nowadays it is like taken for granted that you would, to some degree, want to have these kind of discussions, but at the very same time, would not even have any interest or wish anybody or wish for anybody to have to consistently experience these type of things on their daily lives, while at the very same time, supposedly, the nature of this kind of debates is understood and the nature of this type of discussions is comprehended. So it ends up being weird to find out that so many times people says that they get the utility or not of these things based on concepts that once again trace back not simply to um, a more sophisticated manner of discussions and more enclosed space in which you conduct these type of debates, but rather even to that very same idea of thinking, as I discussed before, think that ends up being, I would even say, absolutely weird, because it is by itself very uncomfortable to believe that somebody will truly say, yeah, thinking at all is a bad thing in life. What? But without attacking whoever said that, you can see why it can be to some degree useful, and you can see why to some degree all of this can be said to be more damaging than helpful for the big majority of those who try to engage in this type of activity. But I don't know. I think from here on, we have already at the very least presented some basis towards what can be considered this and what is partially this. Because certainly, once again, it's sad. Serious problem. Sadly, it has too many ways to be cataloged into an idea of debates and such. It doesn't need to be that way, but the big majority of people can't live without associating so many things to one main concept in order to is themselves with a simpler way to categorize stuff. So that is justified and that is understandable. After all, everybody tries to have a good time, let's say, and the usage of the tools that end up being the analysis and the categories that you make up in the world is by itself undeniably good. So sadly, sometimes you don't realize that you are bunching up stuff that might as well not be so related or even at all related. Simply because, once again, you want to have a good time and not spend so much of your energy deciding if this goes into that category or if this is a completely different category. But whatever, continuing with the discussion itself, if is there any kind of utility behind this, and if is there anything that you can categorize as useful, would you then say that is this something interesting to engage in? Certainly, once again, starting from the highest degree of this question, the nature itself of thinking can't be said to be negative. The nature itself of allowing yourself time to be with your thoughts is something quite necessary for everyone, something that is to some degree or another an obligation for all of those who wish to remain alive to engage in. I will even go as far as to say that so many of the forms of stress that present themselves in the lives of people can be traced back to the avoidance created by the fear of thinking. Because it seems at some point this mechanism of thinking itself ends up even being associated with negative sides and completely damaging qualities rather than with what it is. Simply a tool. It, it, the problem is it itself is hard to describe. Created, obtained, um, evolved into whatever you want to say. Simply describing it itself, thinking process. It is a tool that you have in your hands to eradicate most, if not every literal single problem that exists in your life. That is why, by itself, that's where some nature of thinking can't be classified as negative. It is only in the realization that, once again, you are trying to attack something so utterly necessary that you find out why it is necessary. Because one of the few sides that I kept in my mind when trying to consider this was this whole idea of those who dislike even in any way what can be associated to thinking and all those types of discussions in which you have to use part of your mind, let's say, to process what is being said instead of just, I don't know, saying yes or no in a more simpler manner of discussion, let's say. So, certainly from that side, you will see why people will be so completely against the idea of thinking, and why would people be so against the idea of, to anyway, engage in that type of behavior, let's say. But yet again, the main counter argument of being the necessity of that is such that avoiding it will literally bring pain to life. It sadly can't be something that you can keep not having. And not only because it sounds incredibly simply simple to say, well, you need it, and there might be no real consequence of that besides the pain of avoiding your problems. No, sadly, it also happens that the very same nature of the world which we inhabit is such that nowadays the overcomplication of even the most simplest of the mechanisms by which anybody has a normal life end up being of such a degree that the moment in which you decide to abstain from thinking is the moment in which you end up making it harder on yourself because the constant conscious analysis of the situations in which you find yourself in ends up being the best way to realize if your life is in the supposed or implied order that you say you enjoy so much or not. And to avoid it is only to obtain more pressure and pain associated with that very same disorder created from the norms in which you live so much. And yet again, it seems alluring to believe that not thinking will be to any degree useful, but sadly, I will even go. Yeah, at this point, I accept that I don't possess a proper way to vocalize that, so I will simply retort once again to this whole argument of something, quote unquote, society invites you to abandon your freedom to think because it ends up being better for anybody else to control you the moment in which you relegate this quality and this capacity as something that certainly is useful, certainly something that influences you in positive ways. So you can say and you can believe that this doesn't need to be to any degree a tool that you utilize, but it doesn't fully mean that it works like that. It doesn't fully mean that it does indeed have those, let's say, sides always active. It simply ends up showing, I would argue, that there are already ways in which this is useful. That is why even the present world would, to some degree or another, find itself against the idea of thinking. Because once again, the empowerment that you gain by engaging in this type of behavior can't be anything but something good. So, once again, it is a tool, but it needs enough time to be fully considered as such. Also, welcome, Andy. Uh, I, I hope you're doing well, and hello. We are simply, certainly in a completely um, childish discussion, talking about the nature of thinking, you know? So, I hope you're doing well, and yeah, welcome. Have a seat, put yourself at a comfort position, and I don't know, enjoy. But yeah, as I was saying, therefore, once you realize already that there is something that tries to indicate that this thing can be more than useful for yourself, not for the society itself, but rather for your own self, you already might be capable of elucidating that it is indeed something useful, but that doesn't fully prove its usefulness. It only shows that somebody might be against the usage of this thing in your life. And sometimes you can already, based on the experience that everybody had on being alive, you know that sometimes we wish to warn people about the damages created by certain types of actions. Therefore, you might even believe that the society is somehow shielding you from the damages created by thinking when they tell you that it is of no need of you to be constantly observing the world in which you are existing. So you can, from then onwards, classify it as something that was indeed helping you. But this is, I guess, the biggest point in this whole side of thinking itself, firstly and foremost. Once you realize that thinking can only lead to the different conclusions to which you are capable of accepting, it is the moment in which you are also capable of, by the very same nature of your thinking process, validate or invalidate the previous ones that you had, so that in order for you to reach even better conclusions, you can allow yourself to analyze with an even better mind all the previously existing ideas that you already decided to think about, simply in order to give yourself a chance to fully try to understand to any degree what things is it that compose your life, and which of those can, in any particular way, be improved, let's say, because it isn't without thinking the most natural of the processes to, to which you can come up to those very same conclusions that can lead you towards the improvement of the situations in which you find yourself. It doesn't happen that out of nowhere things get better, let's say, and that ends up being a rule for life itself and something that you find more and more repeated the more and more you keep existing, let's say. So it doesn't happen that you can justify it as, no, yeah, so society makes it good or ensures that you will be having a good existence if you don't think. At the very best, what happens, because it certainly can be considered something akin to a counter argument, society offers you an easier life if you let it influence you in the right ways, let's say, but it doesn't fully make you be better to any degree. It doesn't really let you express more if you stop using the tool that is thinking and live with only what society offers you in terms of, yeah, of a more mechanical life, let's say. And that is, I wouldn't say it is fully explained. It certainly takes too much time to do so, but that is kind of the main argument as to why the first side of this, which is only thinking, can be described as something positive. Because certainly, okay, this catchphrase doesn't leave my mind, so I guess I will have to drop it also. Excuse me if it is too generic, but at the very same time, also, one of the most useful sides of thinking is the very same nature with which, by the process of thinking, it is that you gain the possibility of sacrificing only time spent in your mind in order to not end up sacrificing yourself towards the things that you wish to try, because it is even more with imagination that you possess that you can picture how things might end up resulting in different realities, and you don't need to put your very self into those situations. Only the image of yourself that you're capable of creating inside of your mind ends up being placed inside of that conception of an idea that you make, and that whole scenario that you play out in order to discover the different outcomes that might happen. Therefore, it is by accepting this that you can also realize how, if it is that you do not engage in thinking, you lose this very same capacity in any meaningful way. Because, yet again, repeating, it ends up being with this tool that you can sacrifice only time and only mental energy, let's say, instead of having to be you yourself who is sacrificed in order to experience fully the reality that is made out of the consequences of the actions taken by anybody in those scenarios. So it is yet again that with those proofs you can already start to recognize why, to some degree, thinking is necessary in the most crude of its forms. And now, going from this upper layer of discussion into and let's say deeper one, into this whole idea of why having by itself philosophical debates might be in any degree a useful thing, that is where it gets even more complicated because something that I noticed lately, I have been having an incredibly huge problem with this, has been at some point, I and I hate to say society because it is incredibly easy to disregard every single problem to society without ever properly addressing whoever made it. But for the sake of this argument, I have found out that society has made out that or has ruled out that this whole idea of having any degree of debates, having any degree of conversations, having any degree of discussions end up being considered as something bad because the very same nature with which we associate these words has become somehow something negative. It, it, it is surprising to see that sometimes when you say, "Oh yeah, I was having a discussion with a friend," people react like you were literally fighting with your friend. You were close to ending your relationship with a friend, when in reality, discussions are literally simple exchanges of words in which two different sides are once again debating a point, not a fight in which somebody tries to kill each other with words and prove the other side to be so wrong that they are ashamed of existing. No, it is simply a description that has become somehow so warped. People now believes it is better to discuss, it is better to debate, it is better to once again engage in any kind of a deep conversation. It is negative and it is awful and it is completely damaging and it is viewed by others as something that is by itself bad. And you can't even say that you do something like that because, once again, the judgment made by other people ends up being of the very same nature of this kind. And you feel like you're doing something bad simply because you were trying to talk with your friend and the rest of the world reacted like you were once again at each other's throat, when in reality it was just an exchange of words about something that the both of you were trying to understand. So it already, the question itself of the philosophical debates and the utility of them is already flawed from the beginning of it, since the inception of these words and the association with which we live under nowadays society has become such that we truly believe it is negative to have them. But if you are capable of suspending your judgment about them and only analyzing what is the idea of talking with somebody else, or even once again, because this is also part of the argument, inside of your mind, you can even have these kind of conversations. And inside of your very same self, it is that you can experience the most awesome type of philosophical debates because it doesn't need to be between two different parties, it only needs to be done between two different points of view. And one of the very same capacities that imagination brings to you is the capacity to be, on one hand, the one who advocates for something, and on the other, the one who decides to go completely against that very same thing which you say that you are so interested in. So, if if you can, with that, begin to see why it doesn't need to be fully taken as something negative, now please let me explain why it can be considered even necessary, because there is a side of this type of discussions which needs to happen and which needs to exist in the life of everybody, I will consider, because there is nothing better in instead of having human relationships than to be capable of, with other people, trying to find the proper truth about things. Because it isn't that we live in a world in which nothing is real and nothing is cemented on reality. It is literally the world in which we see, the world in which we are capable of understanding, the one in which we live. So, to be capable of doing something like that, it is necessary for everybody to understand which things are real. And if sometimes you find out that somebody is living in a different reality, let's say, because their vision at least from your point of view, ends up being warped, what happens so naturally is that everybody wishes to help the one who seems to be outside of the norm in order to let them also be part of this world and also be part of what they realize is the good society. And to say that this very same type of behavior is in any degree negative, you're already starting to believe not only that what you are talking about is a world in which nothing needs to be explained because the world of it's somehow self-explanatory, thing that doesn't happen because the explanations are always given by authors or at the very least were left behind by authors. It is by itself necessary to be capable of helping the one that you see and the one that you realize of being in the wrong, that you can coexist in such a world in which things are accepted by everybody as such things. That is the first initial step of understanding why this type of debate is necessary. But furthermore, not only it happens that you can see somebody being wrong, if you believe that these type of discussions are not necessary, what you're talking about is also that you believe it is better for you to be kicked out of the society in which you wish to be part of, or the society that you are trying to associate with, because nobody needs to spend their time properly explaining to you why the ideas that you possess about it might be wrong, and why the proper conceptions of the things that they supposedly talk about might also be the correct one, the correct ones, instead of the vision that you created about this very same topic by yourself. Therefore, it is impossible for you to say to any degree that these things can only be classified as useful if you truly want to, once again, be part of any kind of society. If you somehow come to the conclusion that you don't need to be part of it, then you can justify not being a necessary part of anybody's life, this type of discussion, because once again, the, the cementment of the reality can only be done so through the proper analysis of what the things can be called true or real. And it is only by engaging in this type of philosophical debate, which we sadly classify as so much nowadays, every kind of conversation which engages in the nature of the world, that you can obtain the proper understanding about these things. And it is also only with this type of quality and this type of discussion that you can get to do this very same type of activities with others without feeling, I will say, so judged. I would not fully know if every single side of the narrative seems to fall under that very same category, but most of them would be willing to accept that certainly a more than a bigger portion of the people who does engage in all of that finds inside of them an interest on the ideas that are born out of understanding the world that is around everybody, let's say, not simply around yourself, around everybody. So it is with that you can already once again establish yet another side as to why it is necessary. And I will say, just to give it once again, that as the very same thing as with thinking, they are very complex, although it might simply be an excuse for me to not spend so much time. They are very complex ideas. So, final point onto why any kind of philosophical debate might be considered necessary. We have already discussed the necessity of them for you to live in a society, the necessity for them for you to fully integrate into anywhere, and even more so, because it was already kind of mentioned in both points, but if you wish to live in a world in which things can get to a better state, it is not without debate and without arguments made from different parties that you can all agree which things need to be evolved into a better state and which needs to be abandoned for the rest of the world to advance into a different direction, let's say. And this type of conversation doesn't happen naturally or completely only based on facts. Sadly, one of the qualities of the human nature is the quality of persuasion, so you don't know how many times it is going to happen to you. That's if you're not even willing to discuss things, you're going to find yourself doing stuff that you yourself, in your deepest part of your consciousness at the very least, would consider negative and will classify as fully useless type of behaviors or even damaging types of activities in which you are still quote unquote willingly engaging in. So it is from there that you can already see what is a necessity. But it is only with this type of conversations that you can allow and you can even invite the chance of letting all of those things happen naturally, and you can let all of those things be made into a realer, does that word even exist? I don't know, into an even realer side of, or okay, sorry, into a more real, to not sound so utterly incompetent with words, sorry, into a more real side of the world, and it's an even better reality that you invite the possibility of a conversation between different parties that might have conflicting interests in order to, once again, find out which one of them will properly be the winning one. And also, it is in the acceptance of this same nature that you can also find out why it is that sometimes you are convinced on things that you would otherwise classify as negative. Because if the persuasion itself doesn't seem to be so important because it simply is a word that might as well mean nothing, once you realize in how many ways the internal narrative that you possess has already been infected by the opinions of others and by the ideas that were given to you instead of made up by you, it is that you find out why enacting conversations, or even more, having the possibility of properly discussing these things with others, lets you discover the utility or the necessity to avoid this type of behaviors. Without philosophical debates, it is impossible to give yourself the chance to find proper comprehension in almost any side of your life because the world itself isn't comprehensive. The world simply is, and it is in your hands the possibility of making something understandable or not, and even less of a thing. It ends up becoming a possibility for you to do such things if you avoid the precious gift of using or leveraging, let's say, to not make it seem so manipulative, leveraging yourself around the people that are more than willing to talk about these things, as in anything in reality that happens in the world, with you, so that everybody can reach those degrees of comprehension. But yeah, I think with that I made both points understandable enough. I think so. I hope so. I don't know. I have been talking for like how much I haven't really talking for. Yeah, an hour, almost exactly about this thing. So yeah, that's what I was thinking lately. It it occupied my mind. I wanted to fully properly mention that since it had me kind of annoyed once again this whole idea of people saying, no, yeah, I hate thinking. What? Why would you say something so utterly ignorant? I, I, I love you, but why would you willingly say something so utterly damaging and ignorant? What do you gain from making such types of statements? I don't know. I guess that is the fun of being part of nowadays world that you see so many people living such clouded lives that it seems amazing to be around them. and to see them still being alive, let's say, you would even believe certainly that there would be bigger consequences to not partake, or for those who do not partake in any kind of activity like this one. But once again, certainly the world has been more and more accommodating towards those who do not wish to think. And I do not even know what to make out of that. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it something? What is it? I don't know. I guess it simply is. But yeah, um, by itself, that is the analysis of the topic, I guess. But yeah, that's the stuff, I guess. That's that's what I wanted to say. Basically, that's literally one of the main reasons as to why I decided to finally go live again. I noticed I have been harboring this idea instead of me, as I said before, for like I would say 3 or 4 days already, and I think it finally bloomed into something properly understandable, rather than its initial form, where it was impossible for me to make sense out of what I wanted to say myself. But yeah, um, I don't know. That is quite crazy. I guess you will never truly expect that when going back to that point, you wouldn't expect that there is so much manipulation of the views on so many ideas that make up the world. You wouldn't truly believe that something or someone will be so interested in removing possibilities from everybody by making such things as something so simple like discussing stuff with others look like a negative thing or a harmful thing. I I don't get why people doesn't even seem to care so much about it. It is certainly a quality worth fighting for and something worth wishing to have every single day. The possibility of thinking and the chance of using your time in ideas and concepts that certainly consume a lot of energy to properly understand or even more to fully develop is if it is that somehow you are in those realms of discovering new things, yet somehow we once again find it so easy to discourage people from talking about all of those things. I don't get it. It feels weird. And I guess certainly the weirdness of that doesn't simply lie on the nature of the world. It is more like in the compliance that everybody has towards those ideas. Like, yeah, I would say like this. Certainly the pain created from thinking and from dealing with ideas is such that everybody, whoever went through that, can easily say, yeah, I would, I would rather not think if I was given the possibility. And it seems alluring enough that you don't realize how many times does it happen that what you're being offered doesn't really replace the possibility of thinking. It simply hides it under an underlying idea that seems to be a compensation for what you had in before, but doesn't really fulfill the role of thinking, I guess. The world itself, for those who allow themselves to not think, ends up being a lot more devoid of everything. I find it, and I guess at the very least, certainly they obtain the possibility of not thinking, but I don't know. You see them. If if you see them, and when you see them, you realize that they are husks of humans. That feels bad. And I don't mean it in a sense of wow. It feels a little bit negative. No, 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 no. It feels horrible to see somebody who is so dead while being alive. It is like you really give up the possibility of doing something so utterly useful and necessary for you that you can't fully lead a normal life anymore. But I don't know. I guess that is simply part of being alive and existing. That you, to some degree or another, have to deal with different pains. And I mean, I wouldn't even know because, well, yeah, I had been on Twitter, so I would be lying if I said that I hadn't been. And certainly there is a lot of pain that under underlies in the existence of those who avoid thinking, but it becomes such that the resilience that you possess numbs you towards that pain, but it is certainly even worse of an existence. And maybe it is also even partially the gift of having that pain that allows you to not think so much. Because you need to be more concentrated in avoiding to think about the pain, that by doing such things, then you can fully realize or not if you do enjoy and engage in those activities that you find interesting or not. But I don't know. It still is weird to see that. I mean, you wouldn't expect to see so many people once again living so numbed in nowadays world. I guess, but I don't know. We we have removed from the world, sadly, from nowadays society, the tool that was shame. So we don't have the possibility of shaming those who live utterly simple lives in terms of one dimensionality. So yeah, sadly you can't do anything to those people to make them reconsider. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. But yeah, anyways, I need to take a break, so that's why also I have to finish that. Let's say, if you catch my drift, to take a tiny. So I will need to leave. I need to do something for like 1 minute or two, something like that. So yeah, I love you, but I need to leave. Thank you. Yeah, I will be back. Don't, as always, don't worry. Thanks for your patience. Sit tightly. I don't know, drink water or something. Well, hydrate. Exclamation mark, hydrate. Goodbye. Yo, why is my PC on overdrive? What's happening? What? I don't have anything open. Like, no, what? I don't know. I guess it happens. I can't even explain it. I have no way to explain what is going on right now. But yeah. Anyways, that's the break. Thank you. Um, did I really take like 2 minutes? What? I didn't take 2 minutes, right? Anyways, that's the whole thing that I was thinking about, and the whole idea that I was having lately. I guess I have another one, but I guess that is also part of. Let's say like this. Let's discuss it this way. The anticipation of discussing stuff can be quite hurtful because sometimes I would maybe I am justifying it this way, not really making any sensible point, but sometimes ideas need to be fully fledged before you delve into what they contain inside of themselves. So I believe I have something, but I believe also it is better to keep it hidden until it can fully be talked about. So it is, let's say, you don't publish a book without ever revising what it contains. You only do so once you become capable of mentioning all the strengths and good points that it has sufficiently and properly enough so that everybody who might never even been close to anything even similar to what you made comprehends what is that I think about. But yeah, I guess excuses in reality, nothing else. So yeah, I don't know. I really, I moving on onto something different once again. Yet, but I mean, I don't really want to move on to something different. I am still thinking about it, and I am still trying to make sense out of the previous idea. And there is one particular problem that I think doesn't get mentioned enough, and that is once again tracing back into this whole narrative. It seems we truly become complacent with people who say that they don't wish to think, and there is a side of the world which doesn't even want to help others in terms of you are aware that this is a tool at your disposal, right? You're aware that thinking literally should not be something utterly despised by you because it is one of the most necessary tools for your survival. It is with the thinking that the human became what it is nowadays, alright? You understand that. You're aware of this reality and you're capable of realizing that this works in such a way. Because of that, right? It seems weird when you find out that people truly somehow justifies all of this as, oh, well, poor person who has these problems and poor that poor guy or poor anybody who says that these things are so damaging for them. They needed to not experience these things and they needed to not be part of these experiences and they have more than enough reasons to experience the pleasures of thinking because there might as well be no pleasure if what you experience is only something bad. And I don't know where was it lost in this whole narrative or why is it not even discussed properly. But brother, you're aware that you can literally think about what you like and what you enjoy. You can think about that and you can enjoy thinking and being aware of all this stuff and exploring your mind only things that you can in any degree find pleasurable. You're aware of that. I mean, it seems weird to see people talking so much about stuff that truly seems negative, and it seems weird once again, because that is also one of the problems that I found myself dealing with instead of that. Why is so many people willingly ignoring the reality of, man, you don't need to be so much stress. If somebody is something that you are thinking about causes you so much pain, you literally can change what you're thinking about. Why is it such a necessary thing for you to be stuck on the very same thing? And certainly there are experiences that not everybody is capable of avoiding to think about, but even then, it doesn't mean that you need to deal with that alone once again. And it seems weird that in our society where it is so predicated, this whole idea of, well, yeah, you shouldn't be having problems with thinking. You can't even avoid it. We haven't properly developed tools to help those who think about the necessity of thinking. Like, we really allow people to not have the pleasure of thinking. And it seems see it as negative, I don't know. But yeah, that is the whole discussion that I was having, and I was thinking about since quite a lot, quite a long time. I don't know. Dogs. Anyways, it really has been one of those debates that I keep having and repeating inside of my mind. Like, I don't know. Perhaps every single month I repeat it, probably. So once again, finally mentioning it is good. I guess externalizing this idea after so much time of considering it and such. But anyways, eh, continuing into something different, into one thing completely different. Eh, Before it gets even later, let me finish. let me try to finish the lecture that I didn't finish 2 streams ago. Not the last one, 2 streams ago. Uh, that that has been quite funny. I noticed incredibly late that I need to finish this before continuing. So yeah, um, we have like how much? Let me see. We have around 20 minutes, a little bit more than 20 minutes to analyze. So we will try to finish this thing in proper time before I keep on going and I end up fully forgetting about this. So let's completely change the context. Let's completely change everything, even scene if I can do that. Yeah, let me try to finish this thing. What is this? Hello, there it is. Oh my god. Oh my god, we're back to here. I need to mute the clock. There it is. Hello, here we are. So yeah, I forgot that we had to finish this. So please let me do that. Excuse me for taking like I don't know 2 weeks almost to finish this class. 1 week, more than a week in reality. But yeah, let's finish this. Thank you. Let me let me get here. So. Uh, so, anyways, a quick rundown of what this was about without spoiling too much, I guess. Without mentioning too much stuff. Yeah, without losing too much time on the resume itself. Quick version is we talk about what we already discussed last stream, that was mostly the nature of beliefs and biases and concepts that you already believe are real in life, and the the ways in which you also interact based on first impressions and such. And the good thing is I left it on a completely different point on the change, yeah, on the topic change. So it has nothing to deal with this right now. Therefore, we can continue without any worry whatsoever because it is fully unrelated to what we saw before. I think I don't remember. We saw a little bit from here onwards, but I don't remember at this point. I think it was fully unrelated. So yeah. Anyways, volume should be right, no? It should be right. So yeah. Let me let me check that just in case. Let me see. Play.
A couple minutes to talk about this idea we mentioned
Yeah,
before,
it
that the
is working fine.
vast majority of experimental psychology of the kind I just described to you is conducted in what people call weird societies, Western, educated, industrial, rich, and democratic. There's not a lot of research in impoverished countries. It's just not, there's no research, there's no places to do it or support to do it. So
Also,
the tremendous amount of research.
funny thing, I forgot to change quality. Thank you. Quality, the highest one, 360. Wow. It changed nothing. I am incapable of reading what it says here, so good luck deciphering whatever it says there.
Research comes from some countries like the United States, Europe, Australia, Japan. In the coming years, more and more will come, of course, from China and India, South America and Africa, probably after that. Now, it happens that the countries that produce a lot of the research are the countries that, when people study societal attitudes towards individuality versus sort of fitting in, United States, parts of Europe, Australia, are in the extreme in the world in emphasizing individuality. In fact, the United States is seen as a fantastic outlier among other cultures. Maybe Canada's close. And here's the model that social psychologists talk about. And it's a very simple story in a way, but and certainly it's averaging across lots of people. So a trouble with cultural psychology, which is where we're at now, you can do one of two things. You can say culture doesn't matter, which we think is probably unlikely, right? Cultures are huge. The culture of your home, your community, your country, your religion, all those things influence people. But then when you study it, you tend to reduce it to simple things that people can sort of experimentalize, and you tend to, in some sense, stereotype it. But anyway, the idea is that cultures that emphasize individuality say, like, you've got to be yourself, and then you have some people, around you got to deal with, okay? But be yourself, follow, move across the country, follow that opportunity, be the one. And that countries that emphasize interdependent relations are much more talking about, you'll fulfill yourself to the extent that you find some sort of synergy with those people who surround you. And so when they've done more organized studies, and I'll show you now, on ads on average, say in, most of this research previously has been in Japan and South Korea relative to the United States, but it's spreading to other countries. Many ads in Japan will focus on groups enjoying themselves, and the US version is, you're special, you're the one, be all that you can be. It's you, an individuation. And most of us, on average, are brought up in this culture where we zip across the country, leaving people pursuing opportunities to be ourselves. Sleeping arrangements.
Okay. Something that I noticed. Tiny problem. This thing here. Thank you. A little bit more of speed. Brother, it acts too slowly. Anyways, continuing. I remember hearing a little bit about this before. In a different optic, it happens also that something interesting that always gets perpetuated the more it happens, at least different type of anything in reality that happens is based on the previous occurrences of the very same thing. If it happened that at some point, trying to link it into a proper explanation, if it happened that at some point the narrative was set on the necessity of a more individual narrative itself and a more individual view of the society, it will unavoidably happen that once this gets accepted as such, people will see it then as logical to keep having this type of views. And it will keep happening. Not only that, because this is the predominant optic, people will see it as such. It will happen that the more people see it in such light, the more people will believe that it works in such terms. So it will unavoidably happen that societies who keep being perpetuated towards one direction will tend towards the bigger degrees of ex- extremes of any of both sides. So it will, in this case, the main discussions were Japan and United States. It will happen that both sides will unavoidably derive themselves towards those extremes because what worked before keeps working, let's say. And sadly, I don't think no matter how much awareness you possess about such things by yourself as an individual, it can truly change anything at all. Besides the interaction that you have with your environment, you yourself, which will, in one hand, fulfill the requirements or will fulfill the narrative that wants to be predicated on one side, and on the other will make you go completely against it. So it doesn't really mean anything useful to consider these things and to wish to act upon them. It simply happens that it is like a norm that you will not be capable of avoiding. Let's say it like that. But it is still is such an interesting concept because it takes place in so many people, yeah, in so many people's lives, let's say. But anyways, I guess continuing.
In other countries or in the U.S. tend to emphasize this. Beginning textbooks, Dick, see Dick, see Dick run. Jane is somewhere in
I
Missouri, but
can see anything.
and
Okay.
so I'll leave these notes for you. But this idea again is independent. What counts is that you're independent, or what counts is that you fit in with others. What's the important thing? So it's very hard in these kinds of studies, like with ads or anything else, to talk about cultures as a whole. Things are very complicated. The worlds are different in different countries and everything like that. So people have tried to do these very simple experiments, I'll show you, to try to convince you that at the most fundamental level, very fundamental levels, depending on the culture you come from, your mind is tuned to see the world one way or the other way, relatively speaking. And there's variations within cultures, of course. But here's a very simple experiment. They show you a box like this with a line. The size of the box and the line change from trial to trial. They take it away, and now you see an empty box. The empty box could be the same size or bigger or smaller. And they say, draw a line that either has the absolute same size as this, even though the box is different, or in other trials, they say, draw it so it has the same ratio, the same relative size. Does that make sense? All right. So here, this would be the same absolute size, the same relative size. Here, this would be the same relative size or absolute. Does that make sense? All right. That's all your job is. Draw a line. And you're told, as it's taken away, draw the same absolute size in the box or the same relative size, the same ratio to the box. So here's the first thing to show you, which is that on average, people in Japan are more accurate when they're drawing. This is mean error, so it's good to be low. They're more accurate for the relative size, people in the US for the absolute size. I mean, I think that's kind of amazing, a line in a box. And we know that's not culturally taught. In the United States, we don't have anybody getting up and say, be all that you can be, draw that line in absolute length, right? Okay? So the idea is, it's not a taught thing, it's a way of thinking. And when you get a new example, you apply your cultural way of thinking, many people, much of the time. How malleable is that? Is that fixed in you from birth or not? And then you will help me discover the one flaw in the study. So here's, again, the absolute size. Here's the, here's the.
Okay, there it is. I guess trying to explain it takes too much energy, but one of the plausible ideas as to why something of that sort happens certainly is because you will be capable of saying that the moment in which people needs to be more attuned towards understanding what everybody is aware of is the moment in which you become better at picturing such things in order to see and to contrast your narrative with the one that others also possess. So it ends up making sense that you will be a better judge of, in this case, measurements, simply because you were already good at doing them before. And it unavoidably means then that you will be more and more capable of doing these things if you keep being in those very same societies that perpetuate those needs or those customs. I will not know if which one of them to use, but it certainly doesn't equate to anything negative of the sort. It simply happens that you might find yourself in one of either sides, but yeah, it always is quite a crazy thing to consider, and I don't know, people seems to forget the usefulness of these things. Like, you will truly say there is nothing to gain from being so capable of judging stuff, but at the very same time, you need to be fully judgmental in society. You might never know if what you are judging wrong might cost your life. So I don't know. Once again, there are things that are not being discussed that should be taken with a little bit more importance or seriousness than what they are being taken with us right now. But anyways, that is luckily not my problem. Continuing.
Americans in America having the reverse direction. Here's Americans who were students, graduate students typically, who have been in Japan for a year or two. Here's Japanese graduate students who've been in the United States for a year or two for studies. And you can see that just a year or two makes the Americans look like the Japanese in Japan, and a year or two makes the Japanese look like Americans in America. Does that make sense? Okay. So one interpretation is this is shockingly malleable. I mean, 20 years, 24 years of one culture, 1 or 2 years later, you're shifted into the mindset of the other culture, and maybe that's true. If you're a very hard-nosed researcher, what do you wish would have happened in the study to convince you that's true? Yeah. Sorry? You could think about that. Yeah, that's not the way I'm thinking. I know I'm doing 20 questions. So yeah, that would be a part of the story. Let me ask you this one. The students if you go to the MIT and say, please all students from Japan come and participate, or you go somewhere in Tokyo and say, please all students from the US come and participate, is that a random assignment? No, maybe the American students who want to spend time in Japan are kind of culturally attuned with Japan. That's why they went there. And maybe they, are easily swayed by that because that's why they're there. And maybe these Japanese students on average are swayed by American mores because they came to the US because they kind of like that way of thinking, right? So to really convince yourself this is really true, you'd want to do random assignments where two people come up to you from the US and go, okay, you go to Japan, you stay in Flagstaff, okay? All right? But nobody will agree to do that reasonably. So we just have to make this impression from, but a suggestion that cultural things could be pretty malleable. And a brain imaging study that suggests for this line and box task that it's harder work for people from East Asia to do the absolute task. There's more activation, working harder to do the absolute task, and for people from the United States working harder to do the relative task. It's not that you can't see both. As you sit there, you understand what a relative size and what an absolute size is. It's just harder to take the culturally non-preferred perspective. So,
I mean, sometimes it skips too much stuff, man. I like it, but at the same time I don't like it. uh, okay. In a quick session, it happens that certainly you will not truly know if the people that you are choosing are already biased, but at the very same time, even if they were biased, the degree of differences that they would have experienced shouldn't be enough to justify them being fully attuned to one side or another. On one hand, on the other, it also happens even that if you wish to believe that these people act in such ways, and if you truly wish to justify them as such, you would still not call them fully attuned to one or either side, just because you get the necessity of accepting that neither of the sides is fully fledged in any complete form. So you wouldn't classify them as fully oriented towards something just because they have a minimal interest. And I will say that like this even the bigger of a tendency they have to like something, the bigger of a tendency they have to change opinions even. So it doesn't really mean that they will be fully capable of being the only ones who, let's say, find themselves being in any way or in any degree possible better, or not better, more fitting with the arguments or with the measurements that describe one or the other side. But yeah, I don't know why is it skipped so much. Anyways, continue. I guess.
So here's a kind of weird experiment like this. So knowing now what you know, imagine you walked up to people on average from Japan, South Korea, China, or on average born and grew up in the United States, and you said to them, here's a funny question, which is your favorite shape here, the diamond or the square? If you're a rugged United States Marine Corps individualist, okay, which one do you like? Who's the individualist in this picture? The diamond, okay? I'm a diamond, and I just stand back, right? Who's the, we're all trying to get aligned here correctly, help each other, be interdependent, and form a greater shape from our synergy. The squares, okay? As ridiculous as that is, or here's the triangle, here's one shape wrong, different, here's the triangles. As ridiculous as that question is, as simple, non-cultural as it feels, people from the US like the outstanding figure. People from Korea tend to like the more typical figure, okay? Here's another one. This was done in the airport. Imagine you're in an airport. This was in the days before 9/11, so we weren't as worried about people running around airports, running up to us. Here's how they literally did it. At the San Francisco airport, they would ask you where you're from, and you go, if you were from the US or from Japan or Korea, they would open a pencil box like you might have had as a little kid, and there'd be a set of pencils in there, and they go, please take one. And your first thought is, okay, what's the deal? What's a scam? Are there any security people around? Or they go, no, just please take the pencil. And you go, okay, and you take one, and you think something bad's gonna happen, it doesn't. All they wanna know is this: do you take the individualist pencil or the collectivist pencil? Okay? And there's a 1 in 4 condition or a 2 in 3 condition. Which pencil do you take? Ridiculous as this experiment is. But it depends where you come from. East Asians, on average, picked the majority pen. And people born in the US, European Americans, picked the minority pen, the standout individualist pen. So to a ludicrous degree, I mean, these experiments are almost too cute. But the idea is they want to get rid of a lot of cultural overlay and say, you're just picking a pencil. That's not something that anybody taught you at home or in school how to be or how to do. Here's a similar one. They would show a picture like this, an example picture. First, they would ask people to describe the picture. And they noticed that the North Americans tended to focus on the fish. There's a really big one. He's going to eat the really small one. That's the way of capitalism. I'm being facetious, okay? But their story was on the fish, on average. And on average, the people they studied from Japan talked about not only the fish, but the plants and the background and things like this, on average. Okay, that's just the average description. Then they give them a memory test for the fish, where the fish had the same background, the same context they were in, or no background, or they got a new background. And take a look at the accuracy. If it's the original background, so if you kind of took in the fish with the background, the context, people from Japan did better than people from the United States. If it's no background, the individual fish, you've stripped away the background, it exactly reverses. And who does better with no background? The people from the United States, right? So such a simple thing like this, again, seems to be driven by this. And here's one more. You could say, which is more similar to this? So this is similar.
We are close to finishing this, so I am more than allowed to complain. Sometimes it fully forgets to explain the real point of what is being analyzed, like I get that this follows up with the narrative of people from East Asia is better at identifying things when they are inside of a norm. People from Europe and America have a better time identifying things when they are outside of the norm. Okay, deeper explanation, because we spent 2 minutes, 3 looking at fishes, brother. Deeper. You have time to speak faster. You have the capacity to do so. Do not spend so much time being so meaninglessly slow. But anyways, I guess at the very least it is fully understandable, so I can't complain about that at the very least. But yeah, continuing.
By one standout rule, the common stem. These actually share more similarities if you talk about the shape of the flower, the shape of the petal, but they're kind of different one from the other. And again, the European Americans go for the one standout, that stem looks solid to me, okay? That's the European Americans. And here's East Asians, not completely reversed, but tending to pick the ones that have the more contextual similarity. So it's, you know, here's half dozen examples, and there's 100 more. And so how that influence, you know, it's just a reminder that many of the conclusions throughout this course, including the ones in social psychology, focused on people from North American universities. So let's talk about some of these ones. So for example, we talked about the fundamental attribution error. It turns out that the US is really big on this. It's a little bit worldwide, but the US is an outlier. We really like to attribute the actions of others to their characters and not their situations. The attractiveness bias, very pronounced in the United States compared to East Asians. So we really, find that one outstanding thing and generalize it, okay? And of course, there's variations within each culture, right? Of course. But there's cultural teachings that, seem to manifest themselves in these experiments. Any questions on that?
Okay. Finally, a good explanation. Finally. It minimally adds up to the rest to justify all the time spent on looking at frogs and whatever. Okay. But it is some elucidation towards a better understanding of a lot of situations that happen and that can be attributed to the necessity of the analysis of that particular side of the study, I guess. But with that in mind, what ends up being talked about here is not only this, but also the reality itself of how many or how much of an importance all of these things possess, because certainly there is also something else that barely gets mentioned, I will say, and that is the necessity of a proper explanation in terms of what is the integrational sides of all these experiments and all of these tests getting not fully tested and not fully associated with the rest of the explanations given in order to try and aid those who are willing to analyze these things to a degree to which they can deepen even more the comprehensions that they possess so that they can fully be immersed in the analysis of these things. Let's say it like that. But it takes too much time to integrate all of them and to get, not to get, to give the students a better, a better, more formed final point, sadly. So it is the task of the students themselves to do such things, sadly. And I don't truly know how to feel about it. I guess that is normal. I don't truly know how to see it. I don't think it is good that there is so little free will in terms of how much of an explanation you will receive or not. And it is so much decided by the capacities or lacks of other people. But anyways, continuing.
Okay. Well, for the last few minutes, I want to talk about what's a disorder that you hear a lot about. And if you have questions, I can answer some questions on it. So autism, when I was a graduate student here, you practically never heard of it. Now, when you go to the pediatrician's office, practically every parent is worried about it for their child. It used to be thought of as a very rare disorder. Autism spectrum disorders are now thought to be occur, 1 out of every something like that, approaching 1%. Okay, have you seen the ads on TV about the odds of having autism versus the odds of making the NBA? Any of you seen that? Okay, incredibly higher by far, to have autism than to make the NBA, or many other things you can think of that, that's autism awareness efforts to just make people realize it's shockingly common. Lots of arguments about.
I don't think I need to make the points, but you can't increase your autism, but you can increase your odds of making it to the NBA, my brother. There is no traceable. What? There should be no correlation of those things. One of them you can willingly work yourself towards. The other is a diagnosis that happens to you, and by age 3 you have no control of that type of stuff. But I don't think we are predicting if kids by the age of 3 are going to enter into the NBA or not. Anyways, I sometimes we choose incredibly weird examples and incredibly biased stuff for the sake of doing so. I guess I don't know.
Why there's been a dramatic increase. I can tell you that for a while they thought it was awareness only, that people didn't realize that certain children were best understood as having autism spectrum disorders, a range of disorders that share some properties of different difficulties in social cognition, communication, and stereotype repetitive movements. But now most epidemiologists, you can't really do the experiment, but most people think there truly is an increasing number for reasons that are not well understood, on top of increasing awareness. Nowadays, they can diagnose it by age 3. A huge mystery is why there's 4 boys to every girl with autism, as far as people have observed. It's a total mystery. Nobody has any idea why that is. So I'm just going to show you a few things that have been found with individuals with autism. So one thing is, in terms
No,
of
wait,
individuals with autism, don't seem
wait,
to
I
have
remember
a
something. I
natural,
remember something. I remember something. I remember something. Let me go back to this. Short, short type of explanation of why there are 4 males, 1 female. I remember hearing about it before. Yeah, in multiple sites, even sadly. The difference as to why males seem to be so more diagnosed lies in the capacities and the social cues that different types of people engage in. Somehow it happens that it gets hard because certainly it is very stereotypical, but so far we are talking about childs in that realm. Please understand, it makes sense. In more feminine type of ambience, the females don't seem to be so oriented towards conversations and they are accepted and they are not catalogued as weird or directly observed for problems in their behaviors. While the males, the moment in which you are autistic, one of the problems and one of the major signs of this presents itself in the incapacity of properly associating with others. And this in males doesn't happen by being less communicative, it happens by becoming more aggressive because the male tendency is to be more aggressive while the female tendency is to be less talkative. And those differences are more than enough to justify seeing some as autistic and seeing some as not autistic. You might not even know if some of the antisocial people might have autistic spectrum diagnoses in a wide variety of ranges because it is more accepted once again to be silent instead of being rebellious, which signals a lot faster if a male is autistic or not. But that is something that, as I said before, I quickly remembered before. And it ends up being also one of the main reasons as to why it is harder to identify females because we don't know if a child was not diagnosed simply because they were silent. And because they weren't problematic, nobody took their time to truly assess if they weren't under the spectrum in any degree. But yeah, continuing.
So I'm just going to show you a few things that have been found with individuals with autism. So one thing is, in terms of individuals with autism, don't seem to have a natural desire to socially interact with their parents, their siblings, their caretakers. It's hard to get them to do what's easy for most infants, which is interact with people around you. That's easy for most infants, hard for people with autism. This is eye tracking. When people, so this is a path that you look at when you look at somebody else. And what's very common as we look at people is that we focus a lot of our attention to other people's eyes. Well, that makes sense. You know that from your everyday experience. Okay, you look at the mouth and ear here and there, but it's the eyes of the other person that seem very communicative socially. And so you see this sort of triangle where people go between the mouth, the speaking mouth, and the eyes naturally to figure out what's going on with the person. This typical person with autism, you see it's like they don't even look at this eye. Don't focus on the eyes. Don't focus on the eyes. The original interpretation of this was a lack of interest in looking at these faces as social targets. There's an additional thought that maybe for some individuals or many with autism, there's something uncomfortable with dealing with a social agent or a person. So that's eye tracking. And by the way, this is the same thing when they were, this is spontaneous, the first picture, wherever you want to look. Now they said, tell us what the expression is, so you have a task to do. And again, pretty much like before, typically developing people focus on the eyes, a little bit on the mouth. And again, you can see these very wayward locations of where individuals with autism put their glances. So you can just imagine a very different social interaction if somebody's looking here or here at somebody versus the person's eyes.
I can bet.
There's been a fantastic amount of research about what are brain differences in people with autism spectrum disorders and those without. There's a fantastic variation among, like every disorder, but you might say autism even more, or every difference, autism even more. It seems like there's just a fantastic variation among people with autism. But the one finding that's held up is this, which is that if you measure the total brain size, which is a very gross measure of the brain, right, that there seems to be, early in development, up until age 5, an overgrowth of the brain size in individuals with autism that sort of gets back in development to the typical size. This is the most replicated. Every number here is a different research study. So you can see all of these up here are sort of clumped here. This is the single most replicable finding by far in autism. There's an early apparent overgrowth of the brain. What that means, why that's associated with difficulties in social interaction or repetitive stereotypes, repetitive movement, stereotyped interests, it's hard to know. Earlier in the course, we mentioned that we talked about theory of mind, understanding what thoughts another person holds, and sometimes it's not even consistent with the physical real world. I mentioned to you that that's severely delayed in autism years later. So this is comparing 4-year-olds typically developing for 6 to 12-year-old with autism, and the 4-year-olds outperform the individual autism on theory of mind tasks. All right, so huge delay in understanding what the independent mental life is like of another person. Yeah.
In general, IQs of people with autism compared to...
So the question is, how are IQs in autism? So the answer is, if you measure, so half of individuals with autism are nonverbal. You can't even give them a test. Okay? Those are not the ones that tend to be represented in research because behavioral research or brain research, because you can't even ask them to do things. All the research is skewed towards the higher functioning individuals with autism. If you just took their average IQ, it would be lowish. Okay, but there's many individuals with very high IQs also. And in fact, what's called Asperger's syndrome specifically refers to individuals who have the social difficulties characteristic of autism, but have a very high functioning cognitive and IQ level. So it runs the whole range. If you just take the average, it'd be low, but there's many individuals who are very high in IQ. And so in this study, for example, they matched IQ by having, in this case, 4-year-olds and 6 to 12-year-olds. The IQ was even, and still the theory of mind was much weaker in the individuals with autism. But it's incredibly variable, the IQs. So here's another way that people have studied two things at once. We'll talk about the human nature.
Pause here. It was lightly mentioned, but certainly one of the I will consider that one of the problems of diagnosing autism is certainly that the necessity to do so isn't truly observed or taken seriously, because it doesn't seem to be that much of a problem when people forget how much of an impediment it ends up being in the lives of those who are, once again, the lower categories. And there are, sadly, people who suffer not so many consequences of autism. Therefore, it ends up making this type of affliction seem like a lesser problem, because there are people who, quote unquote, even have advantages by possessing these type of things. So you don't fully know if what do you have in front of you is truly something important to avoid or necessary to fully control. Because you can only base yourself on the better results. As it was mentioned before, sadly, those who are in the lowest end are fully inoperant. And you can't even help those, sadly. So it gets into a very tricky position to talk about autism like they are trying to do here, without accepting the flaws of the actual, once again, sadly, system. But yeah, That's the point.
To ascribe social things, social stories to things, and then how that plays out different in autism. So this is famous work from Hyder and Semmel, and you're going to see these two triangles do something, and I want you to figure out what they're doing, okay?
Haha! We don't need to see that.
I need somebody to put their hand up, and then other people help me out. Somebody put your hand up. Tell me what you thought you saw. Second last quarter left of the whole course. You got to have somebody. Okay, what do you think you saw? They're kind of dancing. Anything else? Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, the big one was trying to get the little one to go outside, but the little one was scared.
Yeah, a comment. There's no right answer, by the way. When I heard here, which is coaxing, that the little one was scared to go. They're playing together. They're having a nice relationship. Then the little one doesn't want to go outside the box, and the big one has to coax and support them. Were you going to say that too? Any other thoughts or feelings? Okay. All right. So yeah, the most common interpretation of this, and Hyder and Semmel, their original point was that humans want to give social descriptions to everything. You know, two triangles. What are you talking about? But almost, if we just let our mind go just a little bit, we're almost giving them animacy. They're moving themselves around. They're having social interactions. They have stories where sometimes there's a bully beating up the little, big circle beating up a little circle, or down. We tend to make up these little stories very easily. So the first thing to tell you is that individuals with autism, on average, again, a big range, on average, don't see these stories, okay, so much. They say on average, like, they're two triangles. What do you mean? And you could say that's not even wrong. It's just not the way people typically interpret things. We typically look for social. And then you look in the brain, and what happens is this. This is brain responses to these social stories where we tend to give it a social explanation versus random displays. They can also have displays where things are whizzing around and nobody thinks anything's happening, okay? And what they see is in the visual cortex, this part of the brain that sees the things, there's equal activation in the two groups. But in parts of the brain that we think are involved in social interaction, like the superior temporal sulcus, medial prefrontal cortex, areas from a lot of research that we believe is involved in thinking about other people and their feelings and thoughts, there's very little engagement of these areas in individuals with autism in the study. So they don't see the same stories, and they don't turn on social parts of the brain that are spontaneously turned on by typically developing people. And here's the last experiment I'll show you, which is this. So it turns out our brains respond and our minds respond very strongly to where people are looking, where their gaze is falling. So imagine that you're talking to somebody, you're telling them something, and their eyes are here. Does that bother you? Okay, yes, okay. Because we think their eyes tell us where their attention is, and if they're not focused on us, they're not interested, right? Again, we're offended, okay? So here's the experiment now, where they have a computer model like this, and they throw on suddenly a display, and the person either looks this way or looks the opposite. Which would you think is the natural way a person would look, naturally, if something interesting happened over here? It would look towards it, right? It'd be kind of weird to look away from it. And when you look in brain imaging at what happens in those conditions, in the superior temporal sulcus and other places, typically developing people for the weird looking away, it's like a mystery to be solved. What's going on? Why aren't they looking at this? Are they angry? Or is there something better over there? There's a social mystery. Why is this person not looking? And there's no difference in those two conditions in the study for individuals with autism. As if, eyes are looking here, eyes are looking there. It's just where eyes are looking. What's the difference? All right? There's not a spontaneous social interpretation or mystery that needs to be understood. So these are just some of the differences that people have observed looking at the brains and behavior of people with autism. Any questions about autism? Yeah. Yeah. The question is, that's a good question. Do those parts of the brain, those areas that in typical people are turned on for social cognition, when we think about what another person's thinking or feeling, do they ever turn on in individuals with autism? The answer is yes, they do. I can tell you that I'm showing you some of the simplest things and probably roughly correct, but there's such a fantastic variety among people with autism, and even within the person, just a very little bit of different of a condition, all of a sudden some of these areas will turn on. It's been a very big mystery. And we don't know whether that's because we just don't understand it right, or whether the variety among patients is so great that we're making the wrong conclusions, saying autism is like this, and that may be true of 5% of individuals with autism. So it's a huge mystery in many ways, and an important one because all of a sudden it's almost 1%, 1 out of every 100 children.
It's finished? Holy moly. Holy. Finished. That's it. That's the lesson. Bye. More. No more to read, no more to anything, no more. No more. Also, OBS is about to crash. OBS, can you not crash? Can I beg you to not crash? Okay, there it is. I didn't expect that we were going to finish so fast. I mean, Well, part of the problem was certainly it lacked anything to properly comment on, so understandable that we finished so rapidly. But anyways, that's finally that's the lesson that I was lacking to finish before. Ah man, nice. But yeah, basically that I guess. With that, we are finished today. I have nothing else to do, and I want to go and eat something. I am stumbling on my own words. I I woke up and I ate something, and it was just an apple, and now I am angry again. Hungry. I am hungry, not angry. I'm hungry again. So yeah, I need to. I need to go. I need something. I'm about to pass out. So yeah, uh, lots of thanks for everything, but I need to go. I am on that tiny edge in which I am about to die almost. So yeah. Anyways, thank you. Uh, uh, so as always, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for looking. For everything. It has been a pleasure. And well, until the next time, thanks for all. Keep yourself safe. Keep yourself happy. Keep yourself well. And whenever we can, we're getting back here. And if we don't, at the very least, we enjoy whatever happened today. Have a good one. And until the next one, bye.